The entire world watched in awe as 33 trapped Chilean miners were brought out to safety on Wednesday, and we also witnessed a classic case of product placement. Joining us now to make sense of it all is Nick Bontis, an award-winning professor from the DeGroote School of Business. Nice to have you with us.
Happy Friday, Taz.
Thank you so much. Well, let's talk about those sunglasses, because those miners came up and they were wearing them actually from half a mile underneath the ground, and we all saw these OAKLEYS. There they are on our screen. They're called Oakley radars, and they were made by the company, complete with polarized lenses. So it should come as no surprise that they are one of the hottest items out there. Are you surprised by this at all?
I'm not surprised, because there are some very, very smart marketing people out there, Taz.
No kidding.
And you know what? We've always talked about product placement. We've talked about it in television shows. For example, Dell shows a lot of laptops on that really hot sitcom with the new explosion. What's it called? Oh my God.
Big Bang Theory?
Big Bang Theory. Thanks,
okay.
Taz. Big Bang Theory. And of course, the Audi race car in the Iron Man movie series. Now we have product placement in real live news stories. So we knew the Chileans were down there for the last several weeks. And marketing department at Oakley was smart enough to say, you know what, when these Chileans come out, they're going to need some sunglasses. What if we donate 30, 40 sunglasses, which isn't going to cost us a lot of money, ship them down there, and we're going to get all this media attention. And you know what, Taz, in the end, they calculated $41 million in free advertising.
You're kidding.
And how much did it cost them? Let's say the glasses cost about $200 retail.
Right.
Probably cost them about $50 to make.
To make them.
$50 times 40 glasses. Very, very cheap. $41 million in advertising in return. Unbelievable. And now we have it, a new tactic, product placement with real live news.
Very good PR move. These are called the Oakley radars. They're being sold now. Of course, if you want them to look exactly the same, you've got to get the lenses specially made, so they're darker colored. In case you're interested, they sell for $180. You said about $200.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. That's $180 American, and you can get them on Oakley's website. So a smart move. All right, let's talk about the LOONIE. The last time the LOONIE hit par was around April. At least the last time it's hit that and stayed there for any length of time. How long do you think it's going to be before we hit parity again?
I think it's going to stay parity, actually. I think we're good to go. I think one of the things that we need to also appreciate is that the U.S. dollar is the weak one. It's not that the Canadian dollar is the strong one. The U.S. dollar is weak across 50 currencies around the world, including the Australian dollar, which is now also at par with the U.S. dollar for the first time in 30 years. So how do we kind of anticipate this sort of news? Well, as shoppers, it's good news, because we can go down there, do some shopping. But when it comes to the businesses in Canada, for example, the biggest one, tourism.
Yeah.
Tourism's going to struggle right now, Taz, because a lot of Americans are not going to come up now to have, those discounted hotel stays. So we're going to have to work a little bit harder now in terms of Canadian manufacturers and exporters to try to actually get the benefit of the parity.
And how can you do that? You've talked about tourism. Let's talk about maybe industries. We're, of course, known for steel and mining and things like that in this country. What can we do to stay competitive with our American counterparts?
Okay, so let's look until June, a few months ago in June.
Sure.
From June until today, the actual currency has gone up about 7%. What that means, though, is for the American consumer to buy Canadian products, it's 7% more expensive. So what does the Canadian organization have to do? They have to do the opposite. In the last 4 or 5 months that there's been a 7% run in the currency, they've actually got to rationalize their own costs by 7%. So the real sensitive consumer who purchases our Canadian products has to understand that from an American perspective, the price has to stay the same, which means for our profits to stay the same, we've got to be able to make that product 7% cheaper than we did last June.
Well, having already gone through a recession and all sorts of cost-cutting measures taken place, how do you find that 7%? Is there any fat to cut off at this point?
There's no. It's very, very difficult. We're already thin, as you mentioned. The margins are squeezed as tight as we can. One of the things that we have to understand is that we could potentially actually be getting a little bit higher than parity. Some of the economists out there are predicting we're going to stay at parity at least for the next few months and maybe get up as high as $1.10. So I think you're right, Taz. From a manufacturer's perspective, finding another 7 or 10% opportunity to rationalize costs is going to be difficult in this environment.
Interest rates expected to go up on Tuesday. Is that going to help, you think?
Well, it's going to make the Canadian dollar a little bit stronger. The problem is the American dollar, all they're doing now is pumping more cash into the marketplace, so actually devaluing the American dollar. So let's not forget, it's really not about the Canadian dollar being strong, it's about the American dollar being very weak.
Let's go on to talk about GM. General Motors stock expected to go on sale next month. The CEO hasn't announced a date or a price, but I think it's rumored to be between $20, $25. Right. How do I ask you this? Because you can't give your financial advice. Would you go out and buy this stock? Put your own money in this?
I would not yet. And I'll tell you why. Because the problem that GM had was that they had lousy cars, lousy culture, and lousy management. So let's take a look at those three things. The cars. Have they fixed the problem? Some people say they have. They've rationalized their manufacturing process. They consolidated some of their brands. The hottest new car coming out right now is the Chevrolet Volt. It's their electronic hybrid. But what we don't know is whether or not it's going to be a big seller yet. So I want to wait to see if the Chevrolet Volt is a big seller. When it comes to culture, let's face it, there's people who've been working in the auto industry for decades and decades. It's very difficult to change the culture, in 12 months or 18 months. So I'm not so convinced that they've got that innovative DNA inside of them yet.
They are paying back some of the money, though, and that's a good sign. Wouldn't that show you that the company's doing better? It's a good sign, but let's take a look at the money situation. If the stock price goes IPO between $20 and $25, it actually has to hit $134 in price before the U.S. Treasury recoups their initial investment from the bailout. Yeah, so can the stock price from an IPO of 20 shoot up to 134 in the first couple of weeks? I don't know. It might in the long run. The good news is the U.S. government is patient, so they can wait a good 10, 20 years before it gets up that high. On the other hand, if you think about something like banks that are, we saw in the last year, American companies, American government clearly bailing out those banks, isn't that going to be the same thing? If the Ontario government and the Canadian government and the American government own a piece of GM, isn't it a very safe bet?
It's safe that we own them because they have trust in them. Now, mind you, it's not the same as another investor like me and you, so if Nick buys it, then I should trust it. The U.S. government really didn't have a choice to buy those shares, so you can't really say that they trust it because they own so much. But generally speaking, the average person out there, there's still too many unknowns. Better to wait to find out what happens to that GM stock price.
Okay. Let's go on to another thing now. Windows 7, you're a big tech guy. The Windows Phone 7 is expected to come out in Europe in a couple of weeks, actually. Have you had a chance to check out the specs on this one, and how does it compare to the Android, to the iPhone, the RIM, BlackBerry?
So the party started last night, and the buffet came, and there was lots of food left, and everybody ate, and now there's just bones left on the meat. Microsoft, you are far too late into the game. Everybody has moved ahead. RIM's moved ahead. Android moved ahead. Motorola with their Droid phone moved ahead. Windows is coming up with something far too many months behind. That's why they're playing catch up. Frankly, Microsoft, you're such a large organization right now. No one expects you to be the bleeding edge of innovation.
But they're talking about some pretty neat features. Ultra customization and personalization. These large tile displays. Everyone likes things that are easier to see, clustered functions. You don't think that's going to win any customers over?
Well, the reality is we got to look at market share, Taz. And right now, if you look at the biggest mobile phone brands in the world, and in the top three, we have Nokia, who leads the way globally, and you have Samsung and LG. Those are the three that lead the way. RIM, BlackBerries are actually in fourth place around the world, tied with Sony, and then you have Droid and the iPhone coming in last. Windows is really at the bottom end of the market share, and they're going to have to climb up, 6 or 7 other organizations before they get a leading spot. Coming so late into the game, it's going to be very difficult for them to do so.
Safe to say you're not going to pick one up?
Nope, not me. I am a Canadian. BlackBerry torch for me.
Stick with the BlackBerry? Okay. I don't know if you've seen these Google robot cars. Google's been test driving these cars. They're able to start, steer, and stop without a human driver. There they are as they're being tested in, I believe it's California. It's called a robo-car. Are they safer than one driven by a human?
Not yet. The interesting thing about this Google robo-car is that there's actually a professional driver in the car with the computer system and actually
a big red kill button.
That's right, a big red kill button, and there's a software engineer sitting in the passenger seat. So here's the situation for me. Would I trust the computer to drive me? Well, you know what? If my BlackBerry crashes, and I apologize, RIM, if it does, I just press reset. If my computer crashes, I just press Control-Alt-Delete. If this car computer system crashes, guess what, Taz? That's a real crash.
I'm sure there's going to be some kind of a backup system, just like there is, for...
But if there's a backup system and I'm sitting there on the 401 and I'm going from Hamilton to Toronto, I'm either going to let the computer drive me or I'm going to drive me. If I have to sit there and watch the computer drive me, what's the point? Am I really just relaxing? I'm going to be so sensitive watching over the computer drive me. It's either one or the other.
Well, perhaps the option is a combo. When you get tired and you're kind of falling asleep, you don't trust yourself to drive, you put it in the...
So we call that assisted driving.
Assisted driving.
I like assisted driving. Google, if you want to come up with some software to assist assist my drive in the middle of the night so I don't fall asleep, and more importantly, so I can have more efficient travel. In other words, you tell me where the traffic is way ahead so I can make the right turn so I have the shortest time from getting to point A to point B. Then Google, I'm with you.
I don't know if we saw the video. It was one of the cars navigating down San Francisco's Lombard Street, the little curly Q. I think we showed that a couple seconds ago. If that car can navigate its way, honestly, it is a pre-programmed route. We have to make that clear. If it can navigate its way down this way, this street, and over pylons and stuff, you still don't trust it.
You know what? I will trust it in about 5 or 10 years, Taz. Because the reality is a computer will be a much better driver than a human being. Why? Because the reaction time is going to be so fast. Computer processing power is going to be way, way stronger than my brain. It's going to get me to Toronto faster and safer than I ever could.
Engineers disagree, though. They say that the computer reacts quicker than the human brain. We'll have to see, I guess.
We'll have to see.
Only time will tell. Okay, future of the automotive industry, is this where things are moving?
Yeah, I think that's where they're going. 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Maybe my children will never drive a car. Google will drive it for them.
We'll have to wait. Okay, well, thanks so much. That is Bontis on Business for this week. Be sure to join us next week for another look. And of course, you can check out Nick's website at nickbontis.com. Thanks a lot, Nick.
Thanks.
See you next week.